Daylight's burning. If you gentlemen want to grab one of these pieces of paper up here on the table with the holes in it. Here we are. So we're on this new piece of paper that you have in front of you. So the last time we talked about the 4 ways to affect lift. And I failed to bring my little stirrer with names on it. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. The whole world. Can you name one of the 4 ways you can change or an airfoil? Okay, close your eyes. What can you do to a wing to make it have more or less lift? What's that? When you say move it up or down, which part of the wing would go up or down? Just the whole thing straight up, and how about the leading edge, the front part? Okay, all right. So if you move the leading edge up, what happens? Called what is that called if you move the leading edge up or down? You know, does anybody want to help Jordan out? Anybody besides Jaron? What's that? No. If you point the wing up or point the wing down, you're changing the angle of attack. Okay, all right. So one of them is angle of attack. So who's got another one? There's 3. Anybody besides Jaron? Jaron, just keep your hand down for the next 17 minutes. Thanks. The velocity of what? Well, you're on the right track. Velocity of the airfoil moving through the air. Okay, so there's 2. Anybody want to try a third one? Anybody except Rodrigo or Jordan or Jaron? Go ahead, Brian. The density of the air, how thick that is. So just for fun, Brian, if the air's thicker or more dense, you think you're going to get more lift or less lift? The air is more dense. It's thicker. If the air's thicker, will there be more air molecules hitting the wing? The air's thicker. It's more dense. There's more molecules. So if there's more molecules hitting the wing, you think you're going to get more lift or less lift? More. Okay. So we've got how fast the wing is going through the air. We've got the angle of attack, and we've got the density of the air. What's that 4th thing? Well, we got speed. You have a radio-controlled airplane, and the wing is about yay big. Can you lift a 10,000-pound elephant, or do you need an airplane with a bigger wing? Well, span, yeah, maybe, but definitely a bigger airfoil, bigger wing. So it's the size of the wing. There's actually more. No, you can't have one. Okay, fine. A good question was asked of me yesterday. Mr. Johnson, I think actually, John, what's the formula for lift? And I thought that was a great idea to take a look at it right now. So you don't have to write it down because it's on your piece of paper, but you probably ought to take notes as we talk about it right now. So on the test, you can expect that I will give you this formula at the top where it says L equal 1/2 times D times V squared times CL, and then I'm going to ask you what are those things. You say, what does the L stand for? You're going to say that lift. That's how much lift the wing generates. That's the L. The D is the density of the air. I know this is tough. The V is the velocity of the airfoil going through the wind. Now on this slide right there it says the velocity of the aircraft, but really it'd be better if you crossed out the aircraft. And it's the velocity of the airfoil through the air. Or if you'd rather say the velocity of the wing through the air, that's okay. Don't tell me that it's a wing bolted onto the air. It's a propeller, even though it's an airfoil and a wing is an airfoil. The V is the velocity of the S. Size, woohoo, it's an S, and size starts with the letter S. And when I say size here, we're not talking about how long the wing is, how wide it is. It's the area, it's the length times the width. So it's how big the surface area is. You know, is it 10 square feet? Is it 20 square feet? Is it 1,000 square feet? How many square feet are on the wing of an Airbus A380? It's the biggest airplane to ever fly. Pretty close to it. Actually, there's an AN-125. One of those. It might be 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. So it's got really big wings, but it might not have the biggest wingspan. All right, and then CL, this is the tricky one. This is the coefficient of lift. So that's not quite so intuitive, so maybe you need to pay more attention to that. The coefficient of lift takes into account two factors that we've been talking about. One is the shape of the wing, and two is the angle of attack. So shape is different than size. You may not recall from yesterday, but you can have a flat wing and the top isn't curved very much, and it might get less lift than a wing that's curved on the top a whole lot. And we're not going to go into more aerodynamics than that. The faster you go, the less curve you need. Okay, there I said it. All right. So the coefficient of lift, that's something you'll notice that the pilot can control or can understand the density of the air. Do you fly when the air is thick or do you fly when the air is thin? The pilot can control the velocity of the airfoil going through the wind, going through the air. But the pilot can't change the size of the wing, and the pilot cannot change the shape of the wing. But you can change there. It says AOA, angle of attack. So I could also ask you this question, say, of all these items in here, which are the things that you can change? Well, as the pilot, to change the lift, well, you can fly in more or less dense air, you can change the velocity of the airflow going through the air, and you can change the angle of attack. And I probably would ask you this. The coefficient of lift is made up of what two things? It's made up of the shape of the wing, which you can't change as you're a pilot. I mean, unless you hit it with a hammer, but I don't recommend it. The coefficient of lift is also dependent upon the angle of attack that the airfoil is getting pushed through the air. And I'm not going to, if it's okay with you, I'm not going to make you do any math problems on this. We're pilots. Somebody's already done the math. What you need to understand is, what can I be concerned about? And then if you want to know, well, how much it can generate in lift under a certain circumstance, there are tables and charts in the pilot operating handbook, which we're going to get to before this. We're going to look at it, how much the airplane weighs. Here's how fast we're going to fly till we take off, and here's the density of the air. It includes how the is performing, which means that might change our speed, and then we'll calculate our crash. Actually, we won't calculate it with the calculator. We'll just use a chart. So what I'd suggest you do is wait till I show you what I want you to draw out of this one. And this is, if I can find the button here. Here we go. Whoops. There it is. Okay. Oh, I lost it again. Because I just want you to draw a line here, and I want you to draw a line here, and I want you to draw this line. And don't worry about it if it's not that great. And you'll notice the line curves down, and I want you to write A, O, A on the bottom, and I want you to write capital C and then a subscript L. There we go. Whoops. All right. So all I wanted you to understand about this point here is that at some point, understand about this chart, is this is the angle of attack. As we're going to the right, that's our angle of attack. And you'll notice the coefficient of lift, the higher the angle of attack in this direction, the higher the coefficient of lift goes. So, hey, cool. We just need to increase the angle of attack. Pull the nose up. Pardon me? What's the starting point? Right, you're absolutely right. That's this point right over here. At this point right here, that is the stall. And this line actually goes down really fast. What I'm trying to get across with this chart here is that if you keep pulling back on the nose of the airplane, you pull back the control wheel and the nose goes up and up and up, and that increases the angle of attack of the relative wind to the airfoil, you're going to get more lift. But at some point, the airflow over the wing isn't smooth anymore, and I'm going to get to that here shortly. It's not smooth anymore, and the wing's going to have less lift, and that amount of lift is going to drop off very, very rapidly. Because as soon as the airflow across the wing starts burbling and is not smooth anymore, then you go far right on this chart. You notice the chart here, this doesn't have speed on it. Does this have airflow velocity on it at all? No. It's talking about the coefficient of lift versus the angle of attack. So we can actually, once we get to that stall point right there, this chart, it actually goes to the right really, really fast. And if it goes to the right really, really fast, you can go from here to here, in 1 second. And your lift is really, really low. And what if you needed, just for interesting, what if you needed this amount of lift here to stay at altitude? If you needed this amount of lift, or coefficient of lift, pow. All right. What I want you to get out of this chart, I'm not going to make you draw this chart, but I want you to get out of this chart that if you just keep increasing your angle of attack more and more and more, at some point you're going to stall the wing and it won't generate lift. And how much lift you get is going to plummet to a really small number really, really fast. So think about that for a second. So every pilot flying every airplane has the ability to pull the nose up too high and exceed this critical angle of attack. But how many people drive a car? How many people in here have driven a car? Most of you. Okay. Don't every one of you, have you driven on a road that's 55 mile an hour zone and has head-on traffic like Reed Avenue? Have you driven on a road that was 55 mile an hour zone, but it's 2 lanes, and so people are coming at you? Do you not have the ability to go slightly to the left about 10 or 15 feet and do a head-on with a semi-truck? Do you not have that ability? I'm not saying you practice it. Okay. So does it bother you when you're driving your car to know that if you turn the wheel in the wrong direction and hold it there and wait for a truck, it's going to hit you and you're going to be really unhappy? Or if a truck is there and then you accidentally just turn it a little bit, does this bother you? Does this stop you from driving a car? Okay, so this is what I want to get across about the stall here, is that although it's in your power as the human sitting in the chair and having the control wheel, and you can pull it back, if you know that's not good for you, are you going to do it? No. Here's what's rather interesting, though. In airplanes, we make an assumption that you might make it loop, and you might stall the airplane. So, private pilot certificate, and all the way through the rest of your career, oh, what if it stalls? What do I do to recover from it? But in a car, does anybody say, hey, let's practice driving on the wrong side of the road, so in case we do it by accident, bleed, really passing another vehicle. All right, so you're going to practice the stall, and then more importantly, in flight, you're going to practice the stall recovery. So the next time we're in the simulator, which will probably be, well, it'll be before this week is over, we're going to climb, we're going to level off at 2,000 feet, and we're going to practice a stall. There's a bunch of different stalls. You can do stalls with the power engine on. You can do it with the throttle all the way back, and the engine doesn't produce much. And you can also stall with the flaps down, or you can stall with the flaps up. And then we're going to look at the airspeed indicator if the bottom of that green arc, the low end of the green arc, is accurate, and whether the low end white arc is accurate. All right, I want to talk about symmetrical airfoils. A symmetrical airfoil is if I draw an airfoil and the top, see if I can do it, is exactly the same as the bottom. So if this distance right here is exactly that distance right there, and the curve here is the same as the curve here, then this is a symmetrical airfoil. The most likely place you're going to find a symmetrical airfoil, I'll give you 2 examples. Number 1, helicopter rotor blades. The big blades on top that are holding the helicopter up and propelling it forward, Most of them are either symmetrical or really close to symmetrical. Same thing for the tail rotor on helicopters. The other place you're going to find symmetrical airfoils are on airplanes that do aerobatics and they want to fly upside down. Airplanes that fly aerobatics and they want to fly upside down. If you had an asymmetrical airfoil, so here it's going to have an asymmetrical. Usually it's very slightly asymmetrical, just a little. So when you want to fly upside down, it's not a problem. So asymmetrical is what we've been doing. Asymmetrical means the top and the bottom are different. So symmetrical equals top and bottom are the same. So what we have to do, let's say, but we can get lift from symmetrical airfoils, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Let's have our relative wind. And in case I ever forget to tell you to draw the diagrams and label them, I'm telling you right now, if I'm drawing a diagram, you need to draw it and label it. So let's have the chord. Let's see if I can draw a symmetrical airfoil. It's going to be tough. All right, I'm just going to draw. It's hard to draw sideways. We'll say that this is symmetrical. Another M in there. So if we take a line and we go from the tail, the trailing edge of the wing, and we put a dotted line all the way through the most forward part, and we keep running that up. I forgot to bring my stuff in here. So Rodrigo, what's this angle here called? It's the blank blank angle. Angle of, yeah, that's right. It's the AOA. It's the angle of attack. Okay. Now, if we have an angle of attack that's anything more than 0, then the air that hits it, this relative wind, it's going to get pushed down. So there's Newton's kind of lift. But what is also going to happen is air is going to go down along the bottom of the wing, and air is going to go across the top and down. And this little curve right here is a little, for the air, is greater than this curve right here. So we actually do get a slightly higher velocity and a slightly lower pressure because we have an angle of attack. So this angle of attack will increase our Newtonian, our lift due to Newton's third law, and it'll increase our lift due to Bernoulli's law. So there are literally airplanes out there that have like 300 horsepower piston gasoline engines that are designed to do aerobatics, and they have symmetrical wings. And you can fly upside down just as easily as you can fly right side up, except you're hanging from your shoulder harnesses when you're flying upside down. Anybody have any questions about symmetrical airfoils versus asymmetrical airfoils? Brian? Have I ever been upside down? Yeah, I've been on roller coasters a lot. Oh, have I ever been down in an airplane? Only deliberately, all but one time. Yes, I've taken some aerobatics where I was flying it, and we did an Emmelman. An Emmelman is where you do half of a loop, and when you're on top and upside down, you roll the aileron so you're right side up. And I've done loops, so you're upside down right at the top. And when I was in navigator school, they put me in a little 2-seat trainer airplane. It only went about 250 miles an hour, just a little jet. And we went, it was out of Sacramento. We went over the Sierra Nevada at about 25,000 feet, and we did aerobatics for an hour to see if I would puke. They didn't tell you to see it, that it was to see if you would puke. And I almost did. I had my 6-sack in my pocket, and I unzipped my pocket, and I was ready to pull it out. But I didn't want the instructor with me to know that I was airsick unless I actually had to puke. And I didn't notice I was airsick. I wasn't airsick until we were coming into land, and we were literally about 30 seconds from landing, straight and level, slow. Landing gear was out, flaps were out, and that's when I started getting queasy. So unfortunately for me, instead of landing, the instructor said, "Oh, we're going to do some we're going to do some takeoffs and landings." So he puts the gear up, asks the tower, he gives a throttle. And of course, he wishes he was a fighter pilot, not just flying these little 50-mile-an-hour jobs around at navigator school. So when he's flying around the traffic pattern, he would do 80-degree bank turns and pull 3 or 4 or 5 Gs. So which for me was like doing aerobatics somewhere. So I'm like going, don't, I mean, I'm not saying it out loud. But so we do that 2 or 3 more times, and I'm literally on the verge of puking the whole time with my hand in my pocket, ready to pull that sack out and pop it open. I didn't have to. We finally landed and taxied up. By the time we got the airplane stopped and the engine off, my nausea had went away. I just zipped up my... Then when we went to debrief, he said, "Oh man, you did really good. You ought to fly. You ought to be a backseat navigator in fighter jets." And I'm like, "Oh yeah." But that's another story. All right. Well, let's talk about an airfoil stalling. On the FAA written test and on your oral exam, they're going to say, how can you stall an aircraft, an airfoil, a wing? And you're going to say, by exceeding the critical angle of attack. You need to say those words. So let's practice it on the final exam. What happened, or maybe the better question is, how do you stall an airplane? By exceeding the critical angle of attack. Now, if you didn't like the word exceed and you said make the angle of attack go higher than the critical angle of attack, you could do that, but exceeding is a shorter amount of letters. So effectively, let's say I've got my asymmetrical airfoil, and here's my relative wind, and here's my angle of attack. Oops. And at some point, this is the leading edge of the wing. So that's this part right there. And this end right down here, that's the trailing edge. The worst thing I would do on a test is draw a wing and say, here's where the wind is going. Please draw an arrow and label the leading edge, and draw an arrow and label the trailing edge. So if you keep pulling back on the control wheel, then that means the leading edge is going to go up, because here's our airplane with the propeller on it. Woohoo. We keep pulling back on the control wheel, the nose is going to go up, and then our angle of attack is going to get even higher. And at some point, when we hit the critical angle of attack, then the nice smooth airflow across this wing will start being burbling and being turbulent, and it'll slow down. So whereas before we had a high velocity and that lowered the pressure, when the velocity isn't high anymore, then the pressure isn't low anymore, and we lose our lift due to Bernoulli's principle. And if the airflow across the top is messed up, then it's going to interact with the air coming off the bottom, and we're going to lose a whole lot of our Newtonian lift, our Newton's third law lift. So that's what happens when you exceed the critical angle of attack. Now, how do you change the critical angle of attack as a pilot? Well, you could go to a higher or lower altitude, and that would do it because now your density is different. But generally speaking, if you're a pilot and you're in a given set of circumstances, there are 2 things you can do to make it more likely to stall or make it more less likely to stall. And what's our relative wind? W is relative wind. There's 2 things to prevent a stall. Yes, that's an abbreviation for indicated. So IAS stands for indicated speed. Here's the good news: as a pilot sitting in the cockpit, you don't have to calculate calibrated airspeed. You don't have to calculate true airspeed. The stall is based on, like that the white arc and the green arc on the airspeed indicator. That's based on indicated. Yay! So if you don't want to stall the airplane, don't go too slow. So go faster. And that either means add throttle, add power, or it means push the nose down, or it means both of them. And you don't have to write this down at the moment, but to recover from a stall, generally speaking, you push the nose forward to reduce the angle of attack, and you increase the throttle so your speed across the wing goes faster. You're going to dive a little bit. You're going to dive a little bit. The other thing here, which we have never talked about prior to this moment, is called wing loading. Wing loading. So wing loading is how much is the wing having to support. How much weight to support? Is it anybody ever scale at sea level? Let's just say it says 300 pounds. We'll just use it as an example. So I step on a scale. It's 50 pounds. All right. Now, if I get into a merry-go-round and it spins around really fast, I'm going to weigh 300 pounds on that scale, but isn't it going to try to fling me upward because of centrifugal force? So if I had another scale up against my shoulder, let's say I was standing up and had another scale up against my shoulder, and I was spinning in that merry-go-round, this might get up to like 50 pounds if it was spinning pretty fast, right? So I've got 300 pounds of force pulling me down due to the gravity, and I got 50 pounds of force pulling on my shoulder because of centrifugal force. All right. You can do the same thing when you're in an airplane, because to turn an airplane, you roll the airplane. You roll it. You bank the wings. So let's say you're in an airplane and you're flying straight and level, and we'll say here's your airplane. And you're flying straight and level, and let's just say the airplane weighs 1,670 pounds. And if you're not climbing, and you're not descending, and you're not turning, then then gravity is pulling you down at 1,670 pounds. But the lift on the wing, all combined, is 1,670 pounds of lift. As long as the lift is equal to the weight, you won't go up and you won't go down. And if you had a meter, so if you had a meter inside of the airplane to show you how much gravity was pulling on you, say 1.0 gravities or 1.0 G's. So in this little airplane, we're going to pretend that we have a little gauge. And it's going to say G's. And we're going to say it points right over here at 1.0. We'll say here's 0, and here is 2. But straight level flight, not climbing, not descending, it's going to say 1 gravity is acting on you. But as soon as you go into a turn, you're like on the outside of a merry-go-round. Centrifugal force is going to try to fling you outward. That's why you're aiming the wings into the direction you want to go, is to counteract that centrifugal force. Anybody ever notice if you're in a car and you make a corner really fast and the road is flat and not banked, it tends to pull you to the outside of the turn? That is, if you're turning left, your body gets flung. Okay, that's centrifugal force acting on your body. But in an airplane, we don't stay flat like that to turn. We have to roll the airplane. We have to change the bank. So if we're in a turn, we'll say, now here's the airplane. And so we're in a right turn. Well, gravity is still pulling down on us at 1,670 pounds. But if we roll this airplane all the way over, we'll get crazy here. If we roll this airplane over all the way to, let's see, if that's that. If we roll the airplane over, so from here to here is a 60-degree bank. If we're in a 60-degree bank, and we're not losing altitude, we're not gaining altitude, the centrifugal force pulling in this direction will be 1,670 pounds. So if we have this little gauge inside of our airplane here that says 1.0, if we have that gauge in here, it's going to say 2.0. It's going to read 2.0 at a 60-degree bank turn. If you're level, you're holding your altitude. So, and it's all going to be straight down along your body. It's going to pull you straight into that seat. So all of a sudden, instead of weighing 300 pounds, I'm going to feel like I weigh 600 pounds. You know, about like I did about 3 years ago. I've been losing 100 pounds a year for the last 3 years. Yeah, Josh believes everything I say. So, yeah, I had to glue 2 airplanes together to fly them. Never mind. Yeah, that was it. Super good. So, if you're less than 60 degrees of bank, the sideways force is less than 1670. And when you're just turning it around 20 or 30 degrees of bank, the banks we've been practicing in the simulator, we've been aiming for 30 degrees of bank. That's only a little bit more than, that's a whole lot less than 670 pounds to the side. Yes, yeah, go ahead, Jocelyn. As long as you promise never to come in here again when class is in session. Can you make that promise? I know it's hard. How about if you promise to try as hard as humanly possible? So, what we're doing right here is we are, because of the turn, we are loading up the wings to greater than 1 point. If we're in a 60-degree bank turn, in this case right here, this is a 2G loading, or a 2G wing loading. We're loading the wings as if 2 gravities are pulling on it. Over in this one over here, this is a 1G wing loading. So if we're over here on the right and we're in a turn, the wings don't just have to create 670 pounds of lift against gravity, it also has to create 1,670 pounds of lift against centrifugal force. So the wing is going to have to generate twice as much lift. And we're going to be stressing that wing as if the airplane weighed, in this case, 3,300 and some pounds. So the strength of this wing has to be good enough to not just handle straight and level and have the airplane weigh 1,670. It's got to be enough that the total force pulling it down here is going to be 3,340. Did I do that right? 1670 plus 1670. So that line straight there, that's straight down. So you're not going to feel that you're getting pulled to the left or right because we're banking. But you'll feel heavier. If you try to lift up your arm, you'll go, man, I got fat arms. That's just like me at sea level when I'm not in a bank. But I'm bummed. Hey, if you laugh, you get points off. Just kidding. So does anybody have any question about wing loading? So let's see. Let's try it. I'm pretending I'm shaking it up. So Brian, in one sentence, can you say, define wing loading? That's really, really good. I would have put it like this. It's the total of centrifugal force that the wing has to counteract. And if I was going to add, I'd say in a level turn, the wing loading goes up the more you bank the airplane. So wing loading is total weight of the and centrifugal force that the wing has. In a turn, the greater the bank of the turn, the higher the wing loading. And then guess what? If this wing has to generate twice as much lift, stall sooner. So in some, granted, about little training airplanes, they can do this and they won't stall. You just go to throttle. You maintain altitude, the airplane will slow down. You'll get close to a stall, but you won't hit the critical angle of attack. Why do I know this? This in airplane flight training as a private pilot. Not a whole lot, but you're going to do some 60-degree bank turns, and you're going to maintain altitude. You're going to stay level. It's kind of fun because the Earth goes around, and then you roll out, and then your stomach is still spinning. No, the wings won't break off until you get to 2.1 Gs. I'm just kidding. If you overstress the airplane, it's probably good to about 4 Gs. And correction, it's good to. I misspoke. Most little tiny airplanes are good to about 7 Gs positive, and if the nose forward, they're good to 2 or 3 or 4 Gs. Blood filling your head and your eyes. Literally, there's too much blood in your eyeballs and red, and your head will hurt because you're shoving too much blood pressure into your brain. You won't like it, and everything in your lap will float up and hit the ceiling. Watch out for those pencils. It's always fun until you get poked in the eye. Ever been poked in the eye? Is it fun until that point? But then, yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it's always fun until somebody gets poked in the eye, and then the fun's over. Yeah. Folks, come out. Stop shooting Alex with that BB gun, and Alex has to go to the hospital. Somebody gets poked in the eye. All right, so here's a little better picture of what's happening when the wing gets stalled. You can see the airflow is all messed up. All right, fine. So when the wing stalls, the airflow gets disrupted, particular on the top of the wing. And how much lift the wing has goes way, way down really, really fast. Really, really fast. And in light airplanes, most airplanes are designed so that when the wing stalls, the nose drops. Which is good because you want to drop the nose to pick up speed, because one of the things that impacts how much lift you get is how fast you're going. And if you have to push the nose forward, you're probably going to lose altitude. So I want to look at this for a second. So here, we're going to say that here is our Piper Tomahawk. And it's got an airfoil on the tail back here. And there's people sitting in there. And that is an awesome Tomahawk. And there's a window. Here's Fred, holding on to the control wheel. And Fred has a flat top. All right. So we're flying along here. Now, let's see. Freddie Rick, where's the center of pressure on this wing? Where's it? The relative wind is going in this direction. So right here is the leading edge of the wing, and right there is the trailing edge of the wing. Where, somewhere between the leading edge and the trailing edge, is the center of pressure under normal circumstances on a subsonic airfoil. That is an airfoil that's not going supersonic. 1/3 where? Down where? Down from the top, or down from the front, or down from the back? I know you got like a 1 to 3 chance here. Anybody want to help Freddie Rick out? The 1/3's right. So is it 1/3 from the top of the wing? 1, 2, 3. Is it right there? Where is it? 1/3 from the top? Okay. Here, I've split this wing up into 3 places. You're saying it's right there? It's 1/3 from the top going down. Is that what you mean? Oh, 1/3 from the front. Yeah, that's right. It's about 1/3 starting at the front. It goes back about 1/3. All right, so that's point right there. That's the center of pressure. All right, now the center of gravity of this airplane is a little bit behind it. We're going to say the center of gravity is right here, and I'm going to use the aviation symbol for center of gravity, and it's usually right around the middle of the wing. So whenever the nose goes up and the tail goes down, it rotates around the center of gravity. Or if you yaw left or right, it rotates around the center of gravity. Now, if the lift, let's try Luis. If the lift, you'll notice how the lift here, the center of lift is in front of the center of gravity. So is that going to try to make the nose go up, or is it going to try to make the nose go down? Don't worry, you got a 50-50 shot. It's like up. Yeah, that's correct. So this center of lift is going to try to be making the nose go up all the time. So literally what we do is we put this tail here like this. So when the wind hits it, the wind bounces up, and its lift is in a negative direction. And so this holds the tail down. Interesting concept. We haven't covered that in this class yet. So that's what that tail, that's part of what it's doing. It's holding the tail down because the center of lift on the main wing is a little bit farther ahead of the center of gravity. It's like the center of gravity is the hinge. The center of gravity is like the hinge point. So if there's a force trying to make the nose go up, we need to have a force trying to make the tail go down. And now the airplane won't go straight up, it won't go up, and it won't go down. It'll stay level. Now, yes, it's true. There's a little tab on here on a hinge. And that's that when we operate the trim in the airplane, in the simulator, we're moving that trim up or we're moving the trim down, and it changes this force. So the nose will try to go up or down. We'll get to that on another day. So we're flying around like this. So let's just say, for instance, then, we decide to stall the airplane. And there's very, very little pressure here. This pressure goes almost all away, almost all of it, because we lose lift. Is there anything trying to push the nose up anymore, LX? If we pull the throttle to idle, and we slowly hold the wheel back, and we slow down and slow down and slow down, and the wing stalls, is this wing getting very much lift if we stall the wing? No, it is not. That's good. Now, so this amount of lift right here, most of it goes away. So how much is this trying to lift the nose anymore? Is it trying to lift the nose as much? That's correct. It is not. So what's going to tend to happen to the nose, LX, in this case? If we don't have anything pushing the nose up, the nose will go down. That's right. So the nose will go down. So this is what's really nice about conventionally configured airplanes with a big wing in the front and a little tail in the back, is that when the engine stalls and the airplane slows down, you get less lift. And if you stall and lose most of your lift all at once, that means the nose will try to pitch down immediately, and you'll start going faster. And in little tiny airplanes like you train, it'll start going faster, and it'll recover from the stall without you even doing anything, as long as you just let go of the control wheel. Because you're the one that made it stall because you kept holding the wheel back. Okay, we're going to practice stalls. Let's do something we're only going to practice so we know how to get out of it. So we're going to... But just... Good news is in the airplane, when you're practicing stalls, there's no 18-wheeler. So I want to say this because I didn't say it before. Practicing stalls is normal. Pilots do it every day. It's not dangerous. Two conditions. One, either the person doing it or the instructor has a lot of experience. Don't worry, your instructor has a lot of experience. And number two, don't do it close to the ground. Because the nose goes down, what's going to happen to your altitude? You're going to go to a lower altitude. Especially, we also were already losing lift. We might have already been descending just before we stall. We get even less lift. We're going to go down. And when I say go down, I mean we're going to lose altitude. So the good news with the stall, in fact, I want to write it on here, is stall recovery. What are we going to do as a pilot in case we stall? We're going to lower the nose, or let's say we're going to just the nose, and we're going to add engine power. You don't even have to write the word engine. We're going to add power. And you're going to practice this until you can do it without even thinking about it. I can do it without even thinking about it. And if you do this right, you don't have to write this part down, but if you do this correctly, and you're holding the nose up really slow, you don't just yank the wheel. Pull it slow. That's what you're doing. How would this happen in real life? In real life, you wouldn't deliberately stall the airplane. You would just be accidentally pulling the nose up. Or you trimmed it wrong, and you trimmed the nose up too high. And then you got distracted, because you're playing your MP3 player and the Black Sabbath song is not the one you like. So you decide you're going to play some Ozzy Osbourne instead of the Black Sabbath, because Ozzy Osbourne is way better than Black Sabbath. I think though, if you had to pick, I'd rather listen to Black Sabbath. Again, listen to Ozzy Osbourne instead of the other way around. Even though Ozzy Osbourne is the lead singer of Black Sabbath, just in case you didn't know. All right. So you're going to let off the pressure on the wheel, and if that doesn't do it, you'll actually push the wheel forward. And at the same time, your other hand is going to go to the throttle, and you're going to push it all the way forward. You're going to push it all the way to take off. And that way you're doing everything you can. You've reduced the angle. And the thrust from the propeller and engine is going to increase your indicated airspeed. It's going to increase the velocity of the air going over the wing. And you're going to do this the rest of your life as a pilot. Every 6 months or every year, you get recurrent training. So, okay, let's go do a couple of stalls. Of course, you don't have to write this part down, but you're going to do different kinds. You're going to do stalls with the engine at idle. You're going to do stalls with you do two kinds of stalls. You do simulated takeoff stalls, and you do simulated landing stalls. So when you're doing practice stalls to simulate takeoff, again, you get 2,000 or 3,000 feet above the ground. Because if you do this badly, you might lose 500 or 600 feet. If you do it correctly, you might only lose 200 or 300 feet. So that gives you plenty of altitude. But in takeoff configuration, you usually have the flaps up, and you got it trimmed for 70 knots, like in a Tomahawk, and you got it all the way in, and you just slowly pull the wheel back. And then the stall warning horn should come on, and you're going to pretend that that's the downside of this. You're training to hear the stall warning horn, but you don't do something about it right away. You wait until it stalls, and the nose will actually break. The nose will actually start going down itself. So you have to let it. So as soon as it starts to fall, you let the control wheel go forward, and even if the throttle's all the way there, you always just put your hand on it, push it forward. And then as it's coming up towards 70 miles an hour, you pull the nose back up and try to climb at 70. If you try to climb at 70, that will cause the least amount of altitude loss. If you're in the landing configuration and you have some flaps extended, let's just say you have the flaps all the way down, and you're coming into land, the throttle's at a really low power setting, and you've got it trimmed for 70 knots. You do the same thing. You start pulling the wheel back more and more and more. But is it going to stall at a slower speed or a higher speed? Think about the white arc and the green arc on the airspeed indicator. If you have flaps, do you get more lift or less lift? You get more lift. You also get more drag. So to counteract that, you got to push the nose down to maintain your speed. But you do have more lift. So if the flaps are out or extended, you'll stall lower. That's why the white arc, the slow end of the white arc, is at a lower speed. So you're coming into line, you pretend you're coming into line, you still go up to 2,000 or 3,000 feet. You trim it for 70 miles an hour, and usually 70 knots, or whatever takeoff. You got the flaps all the way down, you pull the throttle all the way back, you trim it for 70 knots or whatever it is, and then you start pulling back on the wheel. And then when the nose breaks, when it stalls, of course the horn's already making noise, the nose breaks, you let the nose down, and you give it full throttle. But again, in both of these cases, in stalls, you don't want to push the nose straight down, because what you want to do is practice a recovery that will have the least loss in altitude. So in case you do this at 500 feet, you're practiced recovering within 200 or 300 feet. Because the worst time to have a stall is right after takeoff or right after landing, because you're so close to the ground, which is why that's where you tend to practice it. Because after you level off, let's say that airplane stalls at 56 knots with the flaps up. If you're flying along at 100 knots, what's the likelihood you're going to stall? Pretty much zero. So really, the only two times you're likely to stall is when you're slow. Well, there's only two times that you're slow under most conditions, right after you take off and just before you land. So that's why you practice stall recovery just before you take off, or just after takeoffs, and just before you land. Did I lose anybody there? What if you stall and you have an engine failure? Well, if you have the engine failure first, and then you stall, you're going to have to let the nose down, but you won't be able to climb. When you pull the nose back, the nose will still be pointed down some. And so you'll continue to descend. So let's say you recovered and it lost 300 feet, you're just going to keep going down. For helicopters, you never let the blades stall or you will die. You cannot recover from a rotor blade stall in a helicopter. It's death to let the rotors spin too slow. So in helicopters, you practice, you never cause the blades to stall and then recover because you'll die. In a helicopter, you practice recognizing before the blades stall. You go, ah, the blades are going to stall, and you push the collective down, and that lowers the angle of attack of the rotor blades, and they don't stall. If you stall the blades in a helicopter, you will die. The blades will bend up, they will leave the helicopter, and what's left of the helicopter will fall to the ground and squish everyone inside into multiple pieces. But you'll die really fast, so it'll only hurt for 1 or 2 or 3 seconds. But you'll think about it for that 20 or 30 seconds as you're falling. You'll be going, ah, and that will suck. Oh, an engine failure in a helicopter? Awesome, extremely high. Yeah, we're talking about stalling the airfoils. It's like this. So if you're in an airplane, it's only going to take a couple of minutes, and the engine quits. You're going to glide at about a 10-to-1 ratio in a light airplane. That is, for every 1 foot you go down, you go in this direction 10 feet. So if you're at 1,000 feet when the engine quits, that means you'll be 10 times 1,000. You'll be able to glide 10,000 feet, which is about 2 miles, 2 statute miles. So you can pick, look down and try to find a road that can have power lines on it. Land in a great field. You know, best you can do. Okay, in a helicopter, if you're in a helicopter and the engine quits, you glide at 4-to-1. So you go down 1, you go forward 4. And you go, well, that doesn't give you very many places to land, does it? It doesn't. You can't go very far. However, in this airplane, when you touch down on the ground, you're going to need between 500 to 800, and this is a little tiny airplane. You need 500 to 800 feet to decelerate after you get around, because you're going to touch down at around 40 or 50 knots. So you're going to be decelerating. So you need a little bit of a landing strip. In a helicopter, you need a piece of ground that is a little bit bigger than your rotor blades. So there's less lengths of places to land, but now you can just land in an open field that's only 100 feet by 100 feet. You don't need a 500 or 800 foot long stretch. So, which is better? You can argue. I know a guy that has like 10,000 hours in helicopters. He'd rather do an engine failure in a helicopter than in an airplane, because he wants to be able to just set it down in a 100 foot by 100 foot area, and he doesn't want to have 500 or 800 feet. Well, there's a thing called a flare. I'm leaving out some of the issues. Literally what you do is you flare the helicopter and you pull the nose up, and then you settle that last 20 feet. So looking at it from the side, the helicopter is actually leveling off for about the last 200 to 300 feet. The helicopter looks like it's moving forward level, and that's because they pull the wings up. They pull the rotors up, and that slows them down to 0 miles an hour, and then they drop down that last 10 or 15 feet. Do you have a question, Brian? Okay. Airplanes versus helicopters if the engine quits? If you're in a 747, it's still about 10-to-1. So this is a Tomahawk, and that's a 747. Of course, 747, it's at like 35,000 feet. And that would all the engines would have to quit. So yeah, question. Yeah. When you're landing and the flaps are all the way out, the technique to do it, and we haven't covered it yet in simulation, is about 30 or 40 feet above the ground. And the runway's right there. You pull the throttle. This is in little airplanes. You pull the throttle to idle. It's not off. but it's not generating any thrust. And at about 30 or 40 feet, you level off, and the airplane now starts to slow down because you're maintaining your altitude. But you're about 10 miles an hour over the stall speed, 10 or 15. So you hold it there. So let's say you're doing 70, and you get above the runway, and you flatten that out, and the throttle's at 0, so the airspeed starts slowing down. Well, what's going to happen to your lift, Brian, if airspeed across the wing is less? Huh? Your lift is less, so you're going to start settling to the runway. And about 5 or 8 feet before you touch down, you pull the nose up a little bit more. That slows how fast you're going to hit the ground because you get more lift. But if you get more lift, you also get more drag. So that's going to slow you down even more. And in theory, the point in little airplanes is just touching down, the wings stall right as you touch down. It's a little better if you touch down a little before the stall instead of after it. But if you stall that airplane at 2 feet above the runway, you're fine because the tires give and the landing gear gives. But what you're aiming for, so I'm going to say that again, you're coming into land, you got the runway made, so you can glide there without the engine. You have the throttle at idle. When you're 30 or 40 feet above the ground, you level it off. Airspeed's going to start dissipating, getting lower, and the airplane's now going to start to sink. You're going to just sit there for about a second or two, and then the airplane's going to be slowing down. The airplane's going to start to sink. And just before, 5 or 8 feet before you get to the ground, you pull the nose up just a little tiny bit, and you hold it there. So it's kind of weird. You get 40 feet above the runway, and you pull the nose to flat, to straight, because it used to be down, and then you wait. You just hold it there. You don't really hum, but you could if you wanted to. So you're going to wait for about 2 seconds here. And then when it starts to settle, you're going to very smoothly pull the nose up just a little tiny bit more. And now it's actually going to settle more. And just as you think you're about to touch down, you pull the nose back just a little bit more than that. But you wait. So that's what's weird about flying airplanes compared to driving cars and to games. Because I'm one of these places to try to convince high school students to do valet ROP. And they're trying to fly. I've got Microsoft Flight Sim 10, which is almost the same as X-Plane. And they're trying to fly it like a video game. And I try to say, look, make a turn, roll out, and wait. Make a turn, roll out, and wait. See if it did any good. And flaring for the landing, it's pretty much impossible because I only get to try it once or twice. But the point is, look, when you're getting close to the runway, just pull the nose up level. They don't even know what level is yet, but now you guys are starting to think of it. Hold the nose level and wait. In a second or two, it's going to start sinking. As it starts to sink, just pull it back a little tiny bit more. You just pull the nose up a little, and now it's actually going to increase how much it's sinking. With any luck, it falls right as you touch down. The problem is, well, I don't know if it's a problem. This is arguably, for most people trying to learn how to fly, the hand-eye coordination and when to level off and when to pull up that last little bit, that's the hardest part of learning to fly for most people. Now, the other part is all the aeronautical knowledge you have to be able to pass the oral exam, and I'm not trying to say that that's easy. But this other part, you know what? If you've been riding skateboards and unicycles and you've been water skiing and snow skiing and you're a gymnast and you do all these and you play baseball and football and basketball and tennis and you're used to looking at things and doing things with your hands, you have a lot of practice that way, you might be able to learn how to land an airplane a little faster than somebody that doesn't. It doesn't mean that you're going to end up being better than somebody else. It just means you might pick it up a little faster. I've talked to a lot of very experienced flight instructors, and they said, you know what? The best pilots are not the ones who learn the fastest and get their pilot certificate fastest. They may be one of the better ones, but it's not how fast you can get your private pilot certificate. It's how good you are at the end, and do you have all the habit patterns that you need to continue your career and become a professional pilot. So everybody, and I don't blame people for wanting, everybody wants to get their private pilot certificate as fast as they can because every hour costs so much money. I mean, a lesson for private pilot flying is between $200 and $250 for one lesson, and the airplane engine is running for 1.2 or 1.3 hours. So you want to knock that off as soon as you can. If you save 2 flights, that's $450. Yeah, I don't want to do that. But people get worried about it. So what I tell people when they're going to go take flying lessons is, guess what? You got to stop worrying about it. You got to have a really good plan. How often am I going to go flying? Am I going to be rested and fed when I get there so I can pay attention. And I need to fly regular. Like I would tell people, if you can't fly at least 2 times a week, then you can expect if you're just flying once a week, it's probably going to cost a lot more money. And if you can fly more than 2 times a week, it's better. So like if you were going to take flying lessons across Christmas break, you could fly once a day for 5 days a week, that'd be awesome. Just think how the U.S. military does it. You go to ground school for a couple hours a day, you take 1 flight or simulator ride, and then you study for 2 or 3 hours. And you do that 5 days a week. But then, by the time a year is up, 12 months, you're as good as an airline pilot. Except you can fly upside down. All right, it is, we'll say it's 23 after, so back in here at 33 after on a real clock. 33 after.